Be honest, the horse pasture isn't your best pasture, is it? Today on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to talk to Meg Greski, and she's been experimenting with grazing horses regeneratively over the past couple of seasons. We're going to talk to her about their benefits, ecologically speaking.
I think that they have an important role to play in a multi-species grazing program, since in the Great Plains and in the western U.S., we had large herds of things like elk and antelope.
As well as economically speaking.
I definitely think that the group last year provided income, and that was the main reason that they were great last year. The highest bid for cattle was about $1.25 per head per day. The horse bid was $2.50 per horse per day.
All that and more on this episode 420 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by PowerFlex Supply.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. Very excited to be joined once again today by Meg Greski. Meg is a gal from Oklahoma. She's been doing some work down there with organizations, consulting and speaking about different regenerative practices and principles and some of those things. And she recently gave a talk about regenerative horse grazing, and really interesting topic. I think it's a missed opportunity from a multi-species perspective. I think it's also just an out-of-the-box enterprise that somebody could look into. And we're going to talk about all of those things with Meg today on the Working Cows podcast, right after a word from our sponsor today, PowerFlex Supply. PowerFlex Supply is far from another big box store. They're staffed by expert ranchers who use everything they sell in their own pastures. Those same experts enable PowerFlex Supply to offer the Rancher Success Program, a free service that will help you develop your grazing infrastructure plan down to the specific products you need for your livestock, species, region, style of grazing, and budget. For 25 years, PowerFlex Supply has been guided by one rule. If their employees won't use a product on their own pastures, they won't sell it to you. That means that permanent and portable electric fencing, livestock water systems, and rotational grazing supplies they do stock have been hand-selected to be the best you can get. PowerFlex Supply is a leading North American distributor of Gallagher, O'Brien's, Speedrite, Strainrite, and many more. And if they couldn't find an existing product, PowerFlex Supply makes it themselves, including their legendary Super 9 Polybraid and rugged spinning Jenny. Visit powerflexsupply.com to get started. Meg, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back, Clay. It was a great achievement the first time I got on here, but twice wow, I'm speechless.
Oh, yeah, glad to have you. And caught my eye the other day with a post somewhere. Imagine it was Facebook. Saw you were out talking about regenerative horse grazing. And I'm always interested in regenerative anything, but horse grazing for sure, because we want to keep them as well as we can in their interest and in the interest of the land, right?
Absolutely. And horses are kind of tough to manage in a regenerative way, and so that's a great challenge I've been able to take on.
What are some of the challenges that make horses maybe more challenging than other species?
Well, definitely the structure of their teeth, for one thing, because they have 2 rows of teeth instead of just one, like cattle. So they're able to eat down a lot farther on a plant in the first bite. So they are very severe grazers by nature. And therefore, if you don't manage that severity properly, they are very easy to overgraze your property with.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you kind of keep in mind from that perspective? What are some of the tools and strategies to mitigate those issues?
definitely the first priority is just to keep them moving and not allow those second bites to occur, especially during the growing season. Apart from just that, making sure that you manage your recovery periods properly, because the more severely you graze a plant, the longer it is going to take to grow back. So if you are taking a lot of top growth off, you really just got to pay close attention to make sure you're not coming back before that plant is ready.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I appreciate, one of the things in my experience that has I've noticed about horses is that they're very easy to keep in.
Is that sarcastic or no?
No, it's true. I've taken down the fence. There's posts there, but there's no wire up, and they won't cross it because they can still see the posts and they think maybe there's a wire there. Or the other thing, even in that instance, like I took all the posts out, and it took us some encouraging of them to go across that line because they said, "I know that's where the wire was. I don't really want to cross it." I think they're more sensitive to electricity, I think, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're significantly smarter than cattle, which is why it baffles me that I'm having so much trouble keeping them in. Because that has definitely been my biggest challenge so far, is just getting them to respect the polywire.
And I think if they go out, do they, I guess, I don't know. I've seen them go under it if it wasn't on. But if it is on, do they still challenge it in your experience?
What's happening is that I've kind of had two different experiences with this. The first year, last year, that I had a group of horses, they tore it down for the first 2 weeks, and then they stayed in and they trained to it. But the group that I have this year is kind of the opposite. Like, I didn't have problems for maybe the first week or two, and then they started tearing it down. So, and like they always, whenever I put them back in, they always act like they're terrified of it. They won't go near it. They won't step over it. I've never seen them challenge it. So I'm thinking that the problem I have is actually coyotes.
That is chasing them through it?
Yeah, because both of these herds of horses that I have brought in have come from places where I don't think they have near the coyote pressure that I have on my ranch. In my particular area, there's a lot of them. So I think that the coyotes are coming around at night and spooking the horses and running them. And they just, when you have a coyote chasing you or a pack of them, you don't really care where the electric fence is. So yeah. I think that the first group, I mean, they just ran through it until they got used to the coyote pressure, or the coyotes figured out it wasn't really a whole lot of use in messing with the horses, and then they just adapted, which I think that there's maybe just going to be an adjustment period.
So what's the context? What are these custom horses, or what? How are you coming across these horses that you're running?
I think it might be useful to kind of back up to where we left off last time and kind of give a summary of what's gone on. But last time we talked, I was working in south central Kansas, and that was in 2020. And in 2021, in June, I started working at the job that I have now. And through that job, I met a lady who, long story short, ended up renting me her place. And so I've been leasing that for a little over a year now. And that place is in western Oklahoma. I am just a little bit north of I-40 and maybe 20 or 30 miles from the Texas line. So I'm in far western Oklahoma now, but not the Panhandle.
I see.
And so these horses, so the horses last year were a group that belonged to a rodeo contractor out of Texas, and they are a bunch of bucking horses, which, I mean, some people who don't know a whole lot about rodeo might assume that they are feral and wild and crazy, but that was not the case, luckily. I mean, there are varying schools of thought when it comes to stock contractors about how tame and how friendly their horses should be. But this group definitely knew what feed was, and they were used to being in close contact with people, so that was very nice. So that group belonged to a rodeo contractor, and this year's group actually belongs to myself and my best friend, and we have a little stock contracting company. So they are still a group of bucking horses, but they are partially mine now.
Nice. I see. And so how has this business developed over time as far as kind of what have you been learning about, grazing horses, and how are they different from other species you've worked with, and some of those things?
Well, I think that, the first difference that obviously that I've had a lot of dealings with is just the hot wire training protocols and getting them to respect that. And the second difference would probably be pecking order issues. Horses have a very strong social structure, and they tend to bite, kick, and fart and carry on and have their little battles every so often. So that has to be taken into account. Like if you're trying to put them through a narrow gate, the leaders of the pack have to go first, then everyone has to march through in their pecking order. Otherwise, everyone freaks out and gets mad. And I have not really established how far I can go with high density yet. I've definitely all last winter, I had so much grass to go through. I was so understocked that I didn't see a need to try and squeeze them down. So, and then this year I have put them tighter. I've probably gotten them up to about 15,000 pounds per acre, but I haven't gone any higher than that yet. So I don't really know how high I can go without really stressing horses and making them uncomfortable and without taking away the room that they need to exercise and to run. But that's an open-ended question so far. Another big issue that I've run into has been nutrition. Because, like bucking horses, mature animals at rest or at maintenance don't need a super high quality diet, but they definitely need a higher quality diet than cows. And dormant native range in Oklahoma, tall grass, midgrass type stuff is not going to cut it. And the contractor I worked with last year had been wintering horses on hard grass up in the northwest, up in the northern plains, and my environment is a lot different from that. They may be able to get by with no supplement over the winter up there or very little, but in my country, the protein in the grass is measured anywhere from 2 to 4% over the winter, and horses definitely need at least 5 or 6%. Not to mention that they do not prefer to eat really tall, rank, mature forage. They really like to eat the stuff closer to the ground. So they may not, looking back, especially last year when I took on this property, it had been resting for about 3 years. Horses were not necessarily the best choice of enterprise for the grass that I had. However, they paid really well.
Yeah. And so what did you do to overcome that challenge?
They definitely need some supplementation.
What's worked?
I've been using some beardless wheat this year, and as well as some alfalfa that I am just tossing out either flakes off of small square bales or just been unrolling large round bales or parts of large round bales every few days. But then they have been given access to the pasture and making sure that they have salt and making sure that they do not have an internal parasite burden. That's also been really important.
So do you think that there are other major differences between them and other classes of livestock you worked with? I think the stockmanship issue is really interesting from that social structure perspective of needing to make sure, they're going through in the right order and some of those things. Are there other things that have really stood out to you as, oh, that's way different, or this is a lot different from other classes of livestock that you've managed?
Manure reading has been another thing that has kind of raised questions for me, because with cattle, there's a lot of talk, at least in the regenerative space, about being able to analyze manure consistency to tell how they're doing nutritionally. But in horses, I'm not really sure quite how to do that yet, besides just looking at the fiber length in the manure, because horse crap always comes out in like meatball form. It's not like you get a pumpkin pie or a puddle or so on and so forth, unless you've really got some rich alfalfa going into them. So that's kind of a question that I continue to have, is what is the best way to, on a daily basis, monitor adequacy of their diet? I do a body condition score evaluation every 3 or 4 weeks, but that is a lagging indicator. So I would definitely like to start catching nutritional imbalances before the point that it affects body condition, if possible.
And I know, I just was listening to somebody the other day that said that if your cow manure looks like horse manure, then you've got problems, right? If it's got that longer fiber length, it's all stacked up, they're obviously short on something, and you gotta fix that. And that was another thing they said, is that horse manure always has, because they're hind gut fermenters, they've always got, fibers in their manure, and so it's going to be hard to figure out what's going on from that perspective in that by analyzing it that way. So I think you're not alone in that struggle.
Yeah. So I have relied really heavily in my first year on this property on forage tests. And just the standard university test that gives me TDN, net energy ratings, and crude protein. That's really all that I have needed. I mean, not a professional nutritionist, but that has given me a lot of insight into how I needed to design my supplementation programs.
I think that, for sure in the West, a lot more ranches probably have horses around. How do you think what you're doing fits into, or how do you see horses fitting well into a typical ranch or a more traditional ranch where they maybe got cows or sheep? How do you see horses fitting in that scenario?
I mean, I think that they have an important role to play in a multi-species grazing program, since in the Great Plains and in the western U.S., I mean, before the arrival of people from Europe, we had large herds of things like elk and antelope and potentially moose, like large grazing animals that were not equivalent to a bison. And all of these creatures shared the environment and they were in balance with one another. So I think that a horse can kind of be a proxy for some of those non-ruminant animals that are supposed to be in this ecosystem. I've heard people say that the horse's hoof creates more trampling due to the fact that it's not a split hoof and it's bigger. I didn't really see a whole lot of that last year at low density, but at a higher density, they are making some good trampling impacts this year. And they may be able to eat some stuff that other species may not want. I think that especially if you run them ahead of your other animals, like if you ran horses ahead of your cattle, they could take the high quality forage and then your cattle could clean up what is left. That's kind of what I did last year when I ended up really understocked with just the horses. I brought in a herd of cattle and ran them through the same acreages during the dormant season behind the horses because the horses left so much left over. I have also seen horses eat the tops off little blue stem, which is really weird because that's the part of the plant that nothing ever wants. They're really tall, stocky, nasty seed heads, and I've seen a horse just clip that right off about a foot above the ground.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Range Ward. Range Ward builds all-in-one solar-powered electric fencing machines for the serious grazer. Their units featured powered reels, built-in solar chargers, and step-in post storage, saving you labor costs, increasing your profitability, and enabling you to spend more time on other projects. Range Ward's time-saving machines can be found on hundreds of thousands of acres across Canadian and U.S. pastures, ranging from small hobby or homestead-style farms to massive, privately owned or corporate-run pastures and grazing co-ops. Every unit is designed from the ground up to include feedback from working producers and is built in Range Ward's advanced manufacturing facilities in the U.S. and Canada. Range Ward offers a full lineup of fencing solutions, from the Power Grazer, capable of handling 30 miles of fencing, to the all-new Power Reel, delivering Range Ward quality and efficiency in a lower-cost package that will mount on an ATV or side-by-side. To learn more, visit rangeward.com. Yeah, what do you think it is? What do you think horses are best at? What do you think, from a regenerative grazing perspective, what do you think this is the thing that they do best?
I definitely think that the group last year provided income, and that was the main reason that they were great last year. So I actually tried this thing where instead of advertising, okay, I have grass and care for sale, here's what it's going to cost you, I actually solicited for bids. And I figured, well, why not? I don't want to price myself at like $1.25 per head per day. If there's somebody out there who would pay $1.50. So I solicited for bids and I got about 6 people that put in a bid. The highest bid for cattle was about $1.25 per head per day. The horse bid was $2.50 per horse per day. I said, wow, where do I sign? So they were a huge income generator, and they left behind enough forage for me to still run cattle behind them because my forage wasn't exactly what they really wanted. In addition to talking about a multi-species program, what I would want to do in the future, right now I am running the horses and cows separately. I do want to put them together because I work a full-time job. I'm by myself trying to ranch on the side, and running 2 herds is just so much extra work. I would like to put them together, but that would mean I'd have to feed the cows and the horses the same protein supplement over the winter. And this year it was going to turn out to be very expensive to feed the cows some horse quality supplement, but in the future, the labor savings might be worth it.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've considered from that perspective as far as getting them into one herd? How are there ideas you have about how to supplement them for while they're in one mob?
I mean, it seems like horses can usually use the same kinds of protein supplement that cattle can, as long as there is no rumensin, no ionophore, nothing like that in the feed. There's a rodeo company in Elk City, Oklahoma, Butler and Sons, that found that out the very hard way this year. They had an accidentally contaminated load of feed delivered to their place. They ordered feed with no rumensin in it, and it showed up with rumensin in it, and they didn't find out until about 70 or more of their horses were dead.
That's terrible.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And being a super big fan of bucking horses, I mean, that was just heartbreaking to even see, let alone let it be my neighbor. But yeah, so I think that they can largely use the same sources of supplement as long as there's no rumensin in it, or oftentimes people will use urea as a protein supplement or something with some type of animal-derived protein in it. You don't want to use that stuff with horses. You want it to be a plant-derived protein, but say that you're just feeding alfalfa. I mean, you can feed that to cows and horses. You can use cubes, or what we call cake over here, range cubes, pellets. You can probably do liquid feed with them. And there are some other things that people are using in this part of the world that I think would work just fine. I mean, you may end up overfeeding your cattle a little bit just to keep your horses where they need to be, but I think that if you unroll or you lay the feed out in such a way that horses can't guard it, or then everyone gets equal access, that they do just fine together. I have heard about situations up north where people will run horses with their cattle for the purpose of using the horses to break up crusted snow. Mm-hmm. Because horses will kick and paw at the snow in a way that cattle really won't, and so they can expose stockpiled forage through snow so that other livestock can eat it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just gave a talk at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition, will be out by the time this episode comes out as an episode of the podcast. And that was one of the things I said, we should consider multiple species. And maybe you don't think, well, whenever we say multi-species, everybody thinks, oh, a small ruminant. Well, no, not necessarily. A sheep or a horse is another species. And so, then there comes maybe another income stream, maybe just a way to reduce the inputs into your horse cavity, other benefits as well, so I think that sometimes they're the forgotten, especially in the West, the forgotten second species or more species. And I think it's something that we can shift our thinking on, right? Because a lot of times you go to a ranch and what's the most sorry looking pasture on the place? It's the horse pasture, and usually it's where the bulls are too or whatever. And so it tends to get more abused than other places. And so I think there's an opportunity here, right, to do it better, to manage horses better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely tough if it's your using string of horses where you've got to be able to catch them and get access to them and use them every day, or you need them kept up close to the barn for management tasks. But there's probably a lot of ranches in the western U.S. that have large remudas of just mares and foals or breeding stock, or especially with rodeo people, they have young stock that is just growing up that won't even be bucked for the first time until it's 3 or 4 years old. And in those cases, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't run those cattle and horses together, increase the animal impact of that herd, only have to check one water tank instead of two over the winter. And I'm wondering if the horses could also kind of serve as a deterrent to predators. Because I know that there are equine species like donkeys and llamas that are used in a protective capacity. So I'm wondering if horses could be kind of a deterrent to predators as well.
Yep. We are experimenting with that very thing right now. we are most of our grazing days are sheep grazing days at our place. Then we've got a few milk cows and a few horses, and we're trying to run them all in one mob. And the sheep are still the hardest thing for us to keep in. We have one particular horse who's a little bigger than the rest. He likes to get out. The others never get out. I think he goes over the fence, though. I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
I've watched him go under it. I've watched him go under it when it was off, but I think he goes over most of the time, especially when he's in with the sheep, because there's 3 wires there, and so they're not going out. He's not going out through that, I don't think. But anyways, I do. That is kind of the sweet spot we're trying to hit, is to figure out how to keep that whole mob in one group and moving together. And one of the benefits is reduced predation on sheep. And I think so far it's working. That's, that we aren't having predator problems on our sheep when we have the mob together, for sure.
Because I think that with horses, I mean, the temporary fence is definitely not going to be any kind of a physical barrier. So I have bucking horses that can buck 10 feet in the air. I mean, they definitely are not going to be deterred by a 40-inch polywire. But the key is just to make them so scared of it, they won't go anywhere near it. So, I mean, tying aluminum cans to the hot wire, so they'll go over there and be like, oh, what's this? And then get popped in the nose, and they won't ever go near that again. Making sure that you're well grounded, you've got a hot charger, and if I continue to have problems with things not respecting the fence, I will likely go to 2 offset wires about a foot apart. It's either that or can also just put up your next paddock ahead of time as a catch wire, so that way they're not all over everywhere if they do tear down the first one. But I really kind of expect that, like last year, once we kind of get through the phase of them getting acclimated to the coyotes, we really should stop having issues.
Do you ever see this becoming a growing season enterprise? Would you do that as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any trouble with keeping horses during the growing season. But usually, I mean, with the rodeo business, these horses are on the road all summer, and we just need someplace to park them over the winter.
Sure.
But there always, like I said, does exist the opportunity for young stock, because you have your rodeo horses or even bulls that are on the road going to rodeos being campaigned, but then you also have your young stock that's not old enough yet, and you also have your pregnant females and your breeding herds. That all of those animals need somewhere to go year round. And for stock contractors, I mean, feed gets really, really expensive. So if they could find a way to put these animals out on grass, even if they're paying you what would be considered a pretty steep amount in the world of cattle, it could save horse people a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. What would be some of your strategies saying we could keep these horses in for a growing season? How would the growing season be different? I mean, say, let's look 10 years down the road. Now you're just straight up a stock contractor, and you've got some young stock that are running always. You always have some young stock at home that are running on the ranch. What are some of the things that you would think about from a growing season perspective as far as grazing horses?
I would likely manage them a lot like stocker calves. I'm probably with a herd of stocker calves. I'd probably run them together, because over the summer, at least for the first half of the summer, we really don't need much in the way of supplementation. Like, our grass is warm season, it's green and growing, and it's usually good enough for them to keep in good body condition and good performance. And so I would continue to move them really quickly, move them with very short grazing periods, probably move them once a day, because that grass is going to be trying to grow back, and it really does not need a second bite, especially from an animal with 2 rows of teeth. So continue to move them really quickly and make sure I'm not affecting the regrowth of that grass, and probably not put them in quite as high density because I don't want to induce them to graze any more severely than they normally would. So over the summer, it could be easier to put them with another species due to not having to feed and low density, move fast.
Are there things about grazing them in the dormant season? Are they staying there longer? And is that part of the reason why they're more difficult to keep in, do you think? Or is it just probably all coyotes?
I was wondering about that because, like I said, it's been a little different experience this year than last year, and my management practices are a little different too. But I've been able to push them, like I said, down to about 15,000 pounds an acre, which means I've got 21 horses right now, and I mean, they're all full grown. They average about 1,000 pounds, and so 21 of them on about a 1 acre plot, and I've left them there for a couple days at a time. So I'll throw out a little bit of supplement during that period. So I will turn them in, let them eat the grass a little bit, give them their alfalfa for supplement, which really stretches the amount of time I can be in that paddock. So they're not eating off the grass at that point. They're on the supplement, but they're still creating hoof action. Let them clean that up for some dietary balance. And then when we get to the point where I feel like they've eaten anything that was any good in that paddock and impacted all of the areas that I wanted done, then it would be time to move them to the next one. Which I'm definitely staying in these areas longer than I normally would, or if in the growing season.
What are some of the other things, other areas that you covered, other ground that you covered in your in the talk that you gave?
Well, I talked about the whole issue that I encountered last fall, health-wise. So I brought on these horses from the contractor in Texas, and I struggled for the first 2 weeks to keep them contained in the hot wire. Then they finally started staying in, but then they started dying. So I was like, could you please just go back to getting out?
Yeah.
That group was a bunch of mixed ages, and so we had everything from 4, 5, 6-year-old adult bucking horse down to foals that they're about 9 months old that had just been weaned. And we had everything in between. I had a couple of yearlings and 2-year-olds. And so the really young horses that had relatively recently been weaned, they just, every now and then, one of them would just kind of start dragging and have its head low and look droopy and be like that for a day or two. And then I would find it dead. And I had no idea what was going on. And so I hauled him into the vet for a necropsy, and we had bastard strangles, which is way worse than regular strangles. So I guess regular strangles is just kind of like a cold. It just lives in the guttural pouches in their throat and just kind of like a cough and cold for a little bit, and then it goes away. But if you give them antibiotics during that time, or if other factors arise that complicate that, it goes systemic and it gets into their lymph nodes and it causes whole body infections, which usually culminate in respiratory failure. So that's what these horses were dying from. So over the course of a few months, I lost probably, I think it was 4 of them. Out of a group of 32, I lost 4 horses due to the bastard strangles, and I did my best to catch them quick. Like, as soon as anything even looked at me wrong, it got dragged in, and it got a couple of shots of antibiotic, according to what my vet said, which when they have bastard strangles, you have to give them antibiotics. And this was an interesting process, too, because I didn't have a chute. I didn't have a really good working system. So I had to do some kind of sketchy things to get a hold of horses. And so I started giving them antibiotics, and then they sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There was one that I caught it early. I gave it its antibiotics, and it bounced back. But then over the course of the next month or the next 6 weeks, it started having a relapse again and ended up losing that one too, which the vet said that also happens. Bastard strangles tends to relapse.
Yeah, that's tough.
That was a really hard thing to go through. I mean, I was already at my wit's end about having to chase them around and pick up broken reels and restring polywire every day. But luckily I didn't have those 2 problems at the same time. But it was just hard to watch them die.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that a dietary issue then?
Mm-hmm. What probably caused it was that some of the older horses had been going around to rodeos and passing it around, picking it up, drinking out of community water tanks. They're in the same back pens everyone else's horses are in. And the adults are usually asymptomatic carriers. And so they probably brought it home and infected the younger ones that didn't have any immunity. And the younger ones are the ones that always will get sick with it. So, I mean, it could have come from anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So I guess kind of as we point towards wrapping up here, make your case for people figuring out how to include horses in their rotation, maybe with the animals that they already have. Just kind of give us your elevator pitch there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I mean, horses oftentimes are just confined to small lots up around the barns where they're easy to access. And everyone knows that horse pastures are some of the most severely overgrazed and degraded areas on anyone's operation. But if you have horses that don't need management or use on a regular basis, and you can just turn them out and not mess with them all the time, it's really, I think, a good idea to either manage them similar to how you would manage cattle under a regenerative grazing program, or to combine them with your cattle or other species and run a multi-species herd together, because they do occupy a different ecological niche or niche, depending on which part of the country you're listening from. They can be an extremely good source of income, and they can be an underutilized source of an enterprise, especially if you're talking about people in the rodeo business or people who have large numbers of breeding stock. And they do take a little bit extra, I wouldn't say extra, they might take a little bit different understanding and finer points of management, but overall, horses do not have to be damaging to our land if you pay close attention to keeping them moving. I do have a colleague that thinks that all horses should be dry lotted no matter what, that horses should not be grazed just due to the fact that they put a severe graze on everything. But I think that they can be incorporated into a regenerative management plan on ranches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Have you helped other people overcome challenges or get started down this road of grazing horses differently?
Right now, I don't know of, there may be one other guy I know of who is grazing a large herd of horses in some kind of a rotational fashion. I believe he is somewhere in south central Oklahoma, but that was another issue and challenge that I had when I started doing this, was that I couldn't find any information about how to do this. Anything I looked up on the internet about rotational grazing of horses was about, what do you do with like your 3 backyard barrel racing ponies on your 5 acres, you know? So I really just kind of had to figure it out. I know some people that are adopting wild horses and burros from the BLM, but they're not doing a whole lot of intensive rotational management with them. I mean, that would probably be the closest thing that I had to kind of look at for advice, because those animals would have a closer temperament to the average bucking horse. But I really couldn't find a whole lot of information going forward about how to do this. And so that's what I hope to do, is figure this out so that way I can teach other people.
Yeah. What have been some of the most important lessons learned, do you think, then in that regard?
Well, definitely, the hot wire training process is really important. I mean, I wish that I had kept them. I have a little 5-acre trap that's 6 strands of barbed wire where I load everything out and I unload everything into. What I should have done was just kind of fed them in there for a few days longer in order to let them really get familiar with that hot wire and learn that you can go around it, but you cannot go over, under, or through it. Is in both of these years, like due to feed availability and like my work schedule and going out of town and stuff, I've kind of had to rush this training process in the trap, and I've had to just turn them out sooner than I think I should have. So definitely focus on that hot wire training process.
And what do you think you might do different in the future?
Well, I mean, it seems like they are able to see just your standard 9-wire, like hot wire poly braid type stuff that you would use for cattle. And so I've just been using that. But if I continue to have issues with them not respecting it, I might have to go to some of that thicker horse braid stuff, which is really expensive, which is why I don't want to do that. But I know that would keep them in. I think visibility is really important. And what I also figured out was that I have some braided aircraft cable fence that I use for a single internal, like a permanent electric division. They never trained to that. Like, they could not see that. Visibility is important. So my white polywire, they got used to that, but the just the metal wire, I always had to run a polywire along that so that they wouldn't just blow through that because they couldn't see it.
Yeah, I guess it probably wouldn't work to reel it up, but I wonder if you could tie some like timber marking or logging marking tape on it or something.
What I did was that I got some white duct tape, and I made these little flags out of duct tape, and I just stuck them on the wire, and works really great for cattle, but didn't really seem to affect the horses a whole lot. We could have just been that group of horses too. Also, I mean, I haven't had too many groups like so far, so I don't want to extrapolate my experiences with them to all horses. And I think it also kind of matters the level of tameness and the level of training that they have. Because if this is like the in-your-pocket kids horse, trail horse, pet pony, that's going to probably react a little bit differently to things than, say, a BLM rescue horse that has kind of been on its own his entire life.
What's kind of the seasonality, especially? I think there are stock contractors all over the West, maybe all over the country, I don't know, but for sure all over the West. And I think that maybe you could serve them, your niche business could be serving them, kind of with this service. So what's kind of the seasonality if somebody's thinking, I'd like to do this? What's kind of the seasonality of that business and when would they need that service to be provided?
Well, I definitely think, most stock contractors could probably, if they have any type of size and scale to them, they could probably benefit from having grass to send their livestock to, because Oklahoma and Texas is kind of a hot spot for rodeo companies, but all of the ones that I have seen around here, they never have enough pasture. They're always out of grass, and they're always feeding a lot. So they could always stand to save a bunch of money by sending animals off to somebody that aren't going to be needed for a while. But definitely I think that trying to take on a herd for the winter is always a good bet, because most of our rodeos are throughout the summer. But then also all year round, there's probably, like I said, some young stock and some breeding stock that don't need to get on trucks and go to rodeos, that just need somewhere to go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think that's helpful. Where can people go to get a hold of you and find out what you're up to?
Well, I really don't have a website, but you could get a hold of me at mgcows@gmail.com. That's my email. So mgcows@gmail. Around Oklahoma, I can usually be found at any of the regenerative conferences or events and stuff, and I continue to speak and present as part of my job now, so I would love to, if anybody wants to hear more about this topic, or if anybody would like any insight I have about other types of grazing stuff, I'd be happy to consider more speaking engagements.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Meg, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me back, and hopefully within another year or two, I'll have a lot more information about what it takes to manage horses regeneratively.
We'll look forward to it. Very good stuff there with Meg. Really appreciate her coming on to challenge the paradigm of horse grazing and how we can do it better, and some of the challenges she's faced and some of the ways that she's gone about overcoming those challenges. Coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, we'll be talking to Daniel Migalski, and we're going to talk to him about his experience integrating small ruminants and really just the difference they make economically on his operation, and comparing and contrasting conventional and even regenerative cow-calf operations to the economics of his small ruminant enterprise. So look forward to sharing that coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.